and you'll be realizing that the way the Nadifit is, diagnose the patient problems and also interpret the results in the best of the best way. And we are working on that. And in this journey, I really wants to say thanks for the existing Nadifit users because they are really playing a good job here. They're collecting the data from different parts of the country, different patient data, varieties of patient problems, the Nadi they're capturing, and also they're feeding with different patient problems and symptoms to the system. And this variety of data from different parts of the country, along with their problems, which is helping us to tune the Nadifit in a very better way. And we are working on this. We are rigorously working on this, and we are fine tuning it in the best of the best way to understand the patient problems and give a best suggestions for them and a solution for them. So thank you for your support in this journey, because without you people, this product can't be perfect. Yeah. So we move on to the session now. Let me share the screen. Okay. In today's agenda, I'm going to discuss about a few recall from the past webinar, because there are few newcomers here where they want to know the depth analysis what we are trying to do. So I just take the brief a review from the past webinar, and after that I'm going to discuss about particular organ patterns here, especially the liver patterns, where I take especially cases like hypertension and fatty liver problems, and also the women gynec problems, and also the old age problems. And here we also try to discuss how the hyper and hypo level of energy impacts the performance of the particular organs. Especially we talk about liver organs today, and how these variations of energy, I can say the imbalance of energy, impact on the organ performance. And then we disclose about Nadifit features, like, and what best we are working on these particular features to give a better diagnosis. And then we discuss about conclusion, and the question and discussion we'll take up at the end. So the first primary thing is like, if you look at this Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, both these science has a very long history. I can say it's a 5,000-year-old science, and this science has a potential to provide a valid reasoning or the reason behind cause for any kind of problems. What it needs basically is a scientific validation or a scientific or statistical calculation similar to the allopathy, that the people can adopt this, or people can integrate this in their clinical practice. In Nadifit, yes, we are trying to come up with a statistical numbers, a statistical values, where we can prove it. Okay, this science also has a potential to understand many kind of problems. Maybe it is acute or chronic. And in fact, this science talks about different way of diagnosis. Especially in Ayurveda, it provides Nadipariksha. 8 ways of diagnosing a patient. Similar to TCM also, TCM provides different steps or different ways to diagnose a patient. It may be smelling, sensing, observing the patient, and the pulse diagnosis, tongue diagnosis. So there are different ways where we can judge the patient problems, and then we can come to a conclusion. Okay, what is the reason behind the cause? But in my experience, this pulse and tongue diagnosis always retains at the top, because the reason is independent of the patient problems, whether the patient opens his mouth or not to explain the problem. But if you know to perform a best of the pulse diagnosis or tongue diagnosis, you can understand the patient better, and you can tell the possible symptoms the person is suffering, and also the reason behind the cause. Independent of the patient input, we can try to predict the problems. So that's what the manual Vaidyas were doing. They were holding the Nadi, and then they were trying to predict the problems. What we are trying here is, like, with the help of technology, we are trying to adapt that so that the process of Nadipariksha or the diagnosis becomes easier. If you take, Ayurveda, the outcome of Nadipariksha comes in the 3 different energy levels. They call it as Vata, Pitta, Kapha. I can say it's a primary level of diagnosis. Similarly, in traditional Chinese medicine, they talk in terms of yin and yang, where they try to derive different energies based on the yin and yang variations, whether it is the yin is excess or the yin is deficient, or the yang is excess or the yang is deficient. So based on that, they try to understand the patient and their problems. So Vata, Pitta, Kapha and the yin and yang analysis, if you take, becomes a primary level of diagnosis, the initial level of diagnosis, I can say. But here, the challenging is that when we do an initial level of diagnosis, let's say I told Pitta or I told Kapha, what may be the patient problem suffering. If you take a relationship between a doctor and a patient, because for us the God has given us such an intellectual power that we can able to understand and interpret and act accordingly. Suppose a patient comes to a doctor and he says that I am suffering from excess of acidity. The doctor holds the nadi and he will say, okay, the pitta is excess. Because of that, you are facing the acidity. So that is fine. But when we come to a software or a system where it is taking the nadi of a patient, and when we try to understand, when we ask the computer, okay, what may be the patient problem? We can look into the nadi and tell the patient problems. The system may give n number of possible symptoms the person sufferings, because it is also mentioned in Ayurveda that more than 80 type of diseases can be diagnosed just because of vata imbalance. Now, how do we say that this particular patient has this particular problem? Let's say, how do I say that the patient exactly has a back pain? How do I say exactly that the patient has a thyroid imbalance? So that needs kind of even further depth analysis here. This is like, when I say VPK, it's a primary level of diagnosis. If you take the system considers the whole bunch of symptoms. Through the VPK, if I ask the symptom to pick a specific, it is very hard, it's very difficult. I can say it's a very daunting process to make. So that means what we need to explain to the computer in a best of the best way, say that in every stages, the symptoms will get filtered out, so that it will come to a stage where patient has a particular exact symptom. This we call it as a top-down approach, where in the diagnosis process, our diagnosis process should be narrowed down, so that we should come to a conclusion at the end that, okay, this is the reason behind your cause. And I'm not telling we have did it in Nadifit. We are still doing that. We still want to understand the patient better, so that we can exactly give a specific reason behind that cause. And still we are working on that. We are doing a lot of data analysis for that. We are getting multiple data from different parts of this, country with the Nadifit users are using. And we are trying to understand these data and tune the models in the best way, so that gives a very specific cause for the reason. And this needs a depth analysis here. That means VPK or in and yang analysis becomes a top level of diagnosis, a primary level of diagnosis, I can say. So to understand better, what we do in Nadifit is like we try to derive these energy levels of VPK into different categories of energies. I can call it a subdivision of energy levels or sub-energy levels. So basic energy is, as I told you, like VPK, which Vata, Pitta, Kapha. If I look into the TCM point of view, it is dry, heat and cold. So Vata is dry, Pitta is heat and Kapha is cold. So we try to derive this primary level of energy into different categories of energy levels. So we call this as heat. For a primary thing, if I take heat, we derive it into two different categories. We call this as empty heat and damp heat. And I'll come to the point, like what is this empty heat and damp heat. And similarly, when I say cold, empty cold and damp cold. And similarly, when I say dry, empty dry and damp dry. And even if it comes to Ayurveda also, we speak about empty Pitta and damp Pitta, empty Kapha and damp Kapha. And similarly empty Vata and damp Vata. So out of 3 energy levels, we try to derive 6 energy levels, so that our diagnosis becomes, much, deeper. So we try to understand the patient better with these type of energy levels. And if I take the first case, even I explained this in the previous webinars, and I'll try to brush up this. So when I say heat, I told you we derive into 2 different categories here, empty heat and damp heat. Now, what is this empty heat? To understand this better, I'll take a container, an aluminum container, and there is nothing inside this container, and I'll keep it on the stove, and I'll switch on the stove. As soon as the stove starts burning, right, the flame starts burning, the container gets heat, and I'm burning it. Now what happens? It gets overheated, because there is nothing inside this container. There's no water, there's nothing inside that. It's a completely empty container, and still keep on burning this with a very high intensity flame. Now what happens is that at some point of time, the container can take the shape into different shape. It can take the random shape because of the excess of heat. The intensity of the heat is very high. So that is called empty heat. Now if I correlate to the human body, this container is our body and this fire is our activity. We are doing a lot of activity, stressful activity, morning to night. And many people, even they don't sleep at night also. They do this continuous mental activity or the physical activity. There rises a fire. What this fire does is like, it's going to consume your body fluids. It's going to kill your body fluids. And the patient is, burning like a fire. So that intensity of the fire, we call it as empty heat. Many people, we have seen many people actually, if this fire, let's say if this fire is in the kidney or the bladder region, definitely you can ask the patient that he will be suffering from back pain issues. He will be suffering from knee pain issues, joint pain issues. You can ask the patient, definitely you will be facing that problem because that empty heat is killing the fluids, the synovial fluids, which is very responsible for lubrication of the joints. Once the fluids become dry out, what happens? The pain starts. And especially if this continues over the period of time, let's say the patient has an age of more than 60 plus or 70 plus, the fluids are in the joints become dry out. And at some point of time, the joints can take the shape, it can change the shape of the joints. We call this as arthritis, osteoarthritis. And patient is keep on losing the weight because of it's consuming the fluids. The patient loses the weight. And if the same empty heat, if it is in the liver, definitely the patient is hyperactive and he is aggressive, anger, irritating, eye burning sensation issues, headache issues. And this liver fire triggers the thyroid. It can create the hormonal imbalance. Especially patient may end up with hyperthyroid issues. So that is empty heat. So when I say damp heat, now again there is a different heat here. So to understand this better, I'll take the same container, but this time I'll keep a water inside that. When I put this on the stove, the water starts boil. This water initially it gets heat and then it start boil. When it is boiling, the vapors are coming up. You can keep your hand on top of this. You can feel the heat. The vapors are coming and sticking on your palm. You can feel the heat, but also there is a dampness. There is a dampness because the droplets are coming and sticking on your palm. There is a damp plus heat, but the intensity of the heat is minimal compared to the empty heat. Empty heat, I can say it is a fire only. It's a fire. Fire can change the shape of any object. But whereas in damp heat, because of the retention of dampness, plus also there is a heat, patient may suffer from heaviness. I have seen many patients who suffer from excess of sweating. They sweat a lot because of the retention of water inside the body, and plus there is a heat. And if this is damp heat resides in the lower part of the body, let's say again the kidney region, all problems of the patient is majorly at the lower part of the body. It may be the varicose vein issues, it may be the foot burning sensation issues, it may be the hip joint pain issues. If it is in the upper part of the body, let's say it's in the lungs, patient may end up with sinus problem, sinusitis, phlegm accumulation problems. And this dampness creates heaviness and they end up with weight gain issues also. We have seen many such patients, they gain the weight. So that is all about this damp heat. So we need this kind of a discrete level of analysis so that we can understand the patient better. Similarly, if I take the Vata characteristics, again we derive into two different categories here. We call this as empty dry or the damp dry, or empty Vata or damp Vata. To understand this better, what we can do is like, after washing our clothes, what we do, we go to the terrace and keep it for hanging to get dry, correct? Now assume that the external weather is so hot and it's so dry. Let's say it's a summer season. So what happens that initially the cloth will get dry because of the external intensity of the heat or the dryness. And if the dry is even further increases or the heat increases, what happens? The dried cloth starts taking into different shape. You might have observed that the cloth will become shrunken because of the excess of dryness. Similarly, in the patient, if we have an excess of empty dry, our skin will become shrunken. We have seen many cases where skin will become wrinkles on the skin and white patches on the skin, white peeling on the skin, and brittle nails, dandruff in the hair. It is all because of excess of dryness, excess of empty dry, I can say. There is no fluids in that. The body has got dried out. And if the same dryness, if it is in the large intestine, patient end up with a constipation issues. If the same dryness, if it is in the lung region, patient may suffer from depression, sad, a lung region get congested. We have seen many patients, especially they do chronic smoking, right? Smoking. You can observe the chest region. The chest region becomes flat, dried and flat. That is because inside that chest region, we have this bronchioles and alveoli. Because of the excess of dryness, the alveoli becomes shrunken. And these people are very prone to suffer from asthma. After crossing 60 plus or 70 plus, definitely they will end up with asthma issues, where the air sacs becomes closed and they are unable to breathe because of the excess of dryness. And many people, we have seen the darkness in the skin, dark patches, pigmentations, dark pigmentation because of the excess of dryness, empty dryness. Same, if you take the same, again, if you could come to the damp dry or damp water. When I say damp means wetness. It's a cold or it's a kapha. Now what happens here is that, let's say I'll take the same cloth, we'll put it on the terrace. Assume that the external weather is too rainy, a rainy season. All this weather, all this cloths observe the water retention which is present in the external environment, and as soon as they observe the water, they become heavy. They are unable to move. So that is damp or damp water. Basically, vata means what? Momentum. People means who has excess of vata. If you take the kids, right, if they have excess of vata, they will not sit at one position. They will be roaming here and there. When this vata momentum is obstructed by the kapha, there creates a sluggishness or slowness, heaviness. Here, these cloths absorb the water and they become heavy. They are unable to move. And I'm going to discuss about this particular pattern, especially damp water pattern, by taking in the liver organ. I'm going to discuss that in today's class, like how this damp water or damp dry impacts on the performance of the liver function. So next is the coldness. We derive this into different categories here: empty cold and damp cold. When I say cold, means we can say it's a water. So first, to understand this empty cold, what I'll do, I'll take a cooler. What the cooler does, if you put a normal water, you will get a cold water. I mean, cool water get cooled, but there is a momentum, but the water has got coldness. Similarly, if the body has empty cold, now what happens that the patient may having excess of water retention, and he may suffer from frequent urination. You may have seen that many people who have excess of coldness, they go frequent urination again and again, and the color of the urine is pale, white color. And many people who have excess of coldness, they suffer from loose stools also, loose bowel, because of the retention of water is more. Whereas in damp cold, this is like something like a water is solidifying into ice, a solidification of water into ice. I can say extreme coldness. Now what happens when this solidification of, or in the damp cold, particular patient is suffering, it can create a lump formation in the body, especially in the women. People may suffer from uterine fibroids or polyps formation, cyst formation, edema, leg swelling, because the water retention is so high and the momentum is very less here. And many recent cases which we seen actually while taking the nadi, we say in many cases here, hypothyroid issues. People are getting, patient is getting weight gain because of the excess of coldness. The thyroid performance is not up to the mark, and he's end up with hypothyroid issues. So these are the different energies we derive. We try to understand basic VPK into different categories of energy levels so that our diagnosis becomes easier. And next step is like, okay, this is one thing. Okay, one thing is like we try to derive this primary level of energy into different level of energies so that we can understand the patient better. And the next one more level of deeper analysis is like we should able to understand the organ which is imbalanced here. So that means we need both the energy and the organ which is imbalanced here, so that we can make diagnosis even narrower. Because when I say empty heat in kidney, the problems might be different. When I say the same empty heat in the liver, the problem might be different again. When I say damp vata in the kidneys, the problems might be different. Again in the liver, the problems are different. So in that way, we can again make a segregation here so that we can fine tune and come with a conclusion that, okay, this is the reason behind the cause. So to understand the organs better, we try to make use of this 5-element theory, Panchabhuta theory or the 5-element theory, because this theory relates, because our body is made up of 5 elements, Panchabhutas, and this theory relates each element related to specific organs that you might have come across with that. If you take wood element, it relates to liver, gallbladder. If you take the earth element, it relates to spleen, stomach. If you take the water element, it relates to kidney and bladder. If you take the fire element, it relates to heart and small intestine. If you take the air element, it relates to lungs and large intestine. So we can talk about these organs and the energy associated with that, so that we can make the diagnosis better. You can see that I have given an example of 2 cases here. One is like Ayurveda and the other is like TCM case, where it is clearly showing that the organ which is imbalanced, kidney and bladder. And what is the imbalance here is that the yin is excess, the yang is deficient. This is completely a damp cold case, or damp kapha. Means patient is suffering from excess of water retention in the body. You can ask the symptom. All these problems resides in the lower part of the body only. And in the Ayurveda case, we try to give these energy levels in terms of vata, pitta, kapha, and the organ which is imbalanced here. So in this case, I can say spleen and stomach. The energy variations is kapha and pitta. Means like damp heat. Definitely, the patient has digestion problem. He's suffering from gastritic issues. He's suffering from stomach heaviness. So that we can correlate, we can make the diagnosis even much better here. So today, as I mentioned, that I'm going to talk about liver patterns here. Here we try to understand how this hypo or hyper function or hyper levels of energy. Because when I say empty heat, that is hyper. When I say damp vata, that is hypo again. Or when I say damp cold, that is hypo again. How this hypo and hyper energies makes the organ performance, organ performance imbalance. So that we are going to talk today. So particularly I'm talking about the liver organ here. Before that, let's discuss like what is the basic function of a liver. We know that liver is a detoxifier. Liver, detoxifies this cholesterol, it purifies the blood, and it helps in metabolism, especially fat metabolism, other nutrients metabolism. And liver gallbladder stores the bile. Bile is very, very important. That is we called as Ranjaka Pitta in Ayurveda. So that plays a very important role in metabolism of the fat, and it is storage of nutrients. It stores different glucose into the glycogen. That is very essential for our body energy. So, and it's excretion of waste. It converts the ammonia into the urea as a waste material through the urine. So these are the functions of the liver, and this function of the liver get imbalanced due to the hyper level of energy. And based on this, TCM or Ayurveda, they talk about different organ patterns or different patterns of particular organ. They call it as liver chi stagnation, liver fire blazing, liver dryness, liver damp heat, liver coldness, liver indeficiency. So there are different patterns that they're going to derive it based on the hyper function of a particular organ. And we know that in case of liver chi stagnation, so what is liver chi stagnation? Basically, chi has to move freely in our body. We call it as prana in Ayurveda. The prana has to move freely so that there should be no stagnation. If the chi stagnates somewhere, that means there creates a problem. So that is a basic principle that the TCM says, that chi has to move freely and the prana has to move freely. What happens if the liver chi stagnation happens? When the chi is unable to move, it fails to nourish the distant organs or distant cellular system. We have seen many people who suffer from excess of liver chi stagnation. They end up with facing laziness, letharginess, procrastination, feeling of weakness, feeling of tiredness. I told you the damp vata case means when you keep a cloth on the terrace and the external weather is too rainy season, all these cloths absorb the water and they become heavy. They are unable to move. Similarly, in the same case, in the chi stagnation, chi is unable to move because of the external excess of dampness here. Patient may feel heaviness and the metabolism is very weak here. So because basically this is because of liver excess of in excess in the liver, or chi stagnation, or vata kapha, let's say damp vata in case of liver. But if you look, okay, this is what the TCM or Ayurveda says. Liver chi stagnation happens. This is what the problem the particular patient may suffer. But if we look in this in a modern medicine point of view, or the allopathy point of what exactly happens here is that, when the heart pumps, because heart pumps in systolic and diastolic phase, the blood moves to and fro from the heart and out of the heart, from the heart and again towards the heart, due to and fro means systolic and diastolic action of the heart. In the systolic phase, what happens? The blood which is coming from the heart chambers and it moves into the aorta, and from the aorta it enters into the main arteries, and this from the main arteries it move into we can call it as sub branches of arteries. We call this circulation as microcirculation. The blood which is coming from the main artery, it goes to the sub arteries, and there it goes to the every tissues and cellular system, and every cells make use of that blood for the cellular metabolism. This is what the process happens. During the systolic phase, it comes with the higher force, and which continues in the diastolic phase also. Now what happens in case of a particular patient, especially in case of in excess or chi stagnation, or patient is taking too much rest, the blood which is coming from the main artery, it creates an internal resistance. We call it as high resistance. It says, no, I don't want enough blood. The body intelligence says, I don't want enough blood to the muscular system. That creates an internal resistance, which is opposing the blood which is coming from the main artery. And because of this opposition, because there is not sufficient blood goes to the muscular system or cellular system, a sufficient oxygen goes to the cellular system, patient may feel tiredness, patient may feel weakness, because there is a higher resistance happening at this particular region. When the blood is coming from main artery to sub artery level, at the micro circulation, there is creating a higher resistance which is opposing the incoming blood. There creates a lack of oxygen at the cellular system. And you ask the patient, he says he always tries to feel sleepy. He always tries to feel weak. When I ask him to do activity, he will say, I don't want to do that. He feels to sleepy always. But this higher resistance comes down actually when the patient particularly did a physical activity. When you do a physical activity, what happens? There creates a demand for more oxygen in the muscular system. Then the resistance will come down, and the blood which is coming from the main arteries and it moves in the sub arteries for the micro circulation, and where increases the oxygen level in the cellular system. That's what we suggest, especially for the patient who suffer from excess of liver chi stagnation. We suggest him to do a physical activity. Physical activity is a must for them. If you do a physical activity, the chi will move freely, or the blood will move freely, or the prana will move freely in every parts of the cell, so that every cellular level there happens a cellular metabolism. And if you take the old age patients, especially a patient crosses more than 60 plus or 70 plus, due to the vascular aging, there creates a stiffness of arteries, a stiffed arteries. What is stiffed arteries? Something like the artery become rigid and narrow. We have seen many patients, because especially as the age progresses, the arteries becomes very stiff and narrow. And in the systole phase, the blood which is coming from the heart chambers into the aorta, because of the narrow down of the arteries, because the arteries are not elastic here, because of the narrow down of the artery, the blood rushes with a very high speed. In order to understand this even better, let's take a 2-inch pipe, where the water is coming. Let's say water is coming, fill of completely 2-inch. It is covering the full mouth of pipe. I can say fill of a pipe full of water in a 2-inch pipe. What I will do is, like, I'll take another pipe which is just a half an inch. With the help of connector, I try to join this with a 2-inch pipe. The half an inch extra connector I try to join with for the 2-inch pipe. As soon as the water enters into the half an inch pipe, the pressure increases and it rushes with a very high speed. In the same way, if our arteries become narrow and if it is become stiff, blood comes with a very high force. And if there is an internal resistance happening, the higher resistance happens at the arterial, in the subarterial region, even a small resistance for this high speed of blood creates a very hypertension, a high blood pressure. We have seen many patients who has crosses 60 plus 70 plus age, they suffer from very hypertension or excess of vata. I can say in Ayurveda, excess of vata is excess. Even a small obstacle creates a rise in high blood pressure. So because the momentum of the blood is very high, sometimes what happens that as the age progresses, the artery strength becomes weakens. These sometimes for few patients, the arteries could not able to sustain that force and they end up with damage of arteries. We call this a stroke. And this has happened to my grandfather only. He was almost 90 plus age. And I still remember that day. He's basically a vata person, a pure excess of chi stagnation. There was lumps also formation in the body for him. I still remember that day. What happens is, like, he had a heavy full of meals during the night, and he slept. And he could not able to digest that food because of the weak digestion. And he tried to go for the vomiting. As soon as he vomits, right, the blood is pumping with a very high force. The heart is pumping with a very high force. The blood which is coming from the artery, because of the narrow down of the arterial stiffness, because of the narrowing of the arteries, which is coming with a high force, and nerve in the brain, it got damaged and he got brain stroke. That was his last day. Arteries could not able to sustain the pressure because of the narrow down of because the major region is like stiffness of the arteries, rigid arteries. So the momentum is very high. The vata is very high. So next, especially in the women problems, I told you the chi has to move freely. The blood has to move freely because liver organ, especially in the women, plays a very important role. It nourishes our gynec organs, especially during the menstruation. It supplies the menstrual blood. But if there is a chi stagnation, the blood the chi is not moving freely. Many women end up with menstruation problems, especially cramps during the menses. They feel very painful periods. And few patients may end up with ovarian cysts also, cyst formation, because the chi is, the liver is unable to nourish this gynec organs in the proper way. So these are all because of the excess of liver chi stagnation. And when I say liver chi stagnation or liver damp vata, I mentioned that there is no at all here. There is no fire. Fire is very essential for us, especially the bile. The bile is very essential for the metabolism of the fat. What happens is that when the Agni is very weak, the fats are not converting into fatty acids, because there are a lot of chemical reactions happens in the liver here. When I say chemical reactions, any reactions which happens much faster if there is a heat is a medium. If there is a heat, reactions will go much faster. Let's take example in the summer season. If you cook a rice and you keep it without touching it, and in the evening or night, if you open it, it will get spoiled. Because in the summer, the temperature is high. The spoiling of food is a chemical reaction. It will happen in a much faster rate. But if you keep this in a refrigerator or a cooling area where the temperature is very minimal, the reaction which will not happen. Similarly, converting fat into fatty acids, it's a chemical reaction. This reaction will happens much faster if there is a heat is a medium, this there bile is a medium, or excess of yang energy. And if you look into this anatomy of these fat cells, these fat cells are circular in shape or oval in shape, and they are the basic building blocks of circular shaped organs. If you take a liver region, there is a curved like structure like this, and these fat cells are the building blocks of that particular organ. If you take heart region, heart is circular in nature. These cells are the building blocks of that organ. Similarly, kidneys, ovaries, diaphragm, all are the building blocks of this adipose tissue. We call it adipose tissue or these fat cells. And each cell is a reservoir of lipids. Means it's basically I can say it's a tanker of Agni. These lipids or fats will not convert into fatty acids. And these fatty acids are very essential for the cellular reservoir of lipids, and they'll keep on building on the liver. This collection of fat cells, and finally, patient may end up with fatty liver problems. We have seen many cases who has excess of liver in excess, as chi stagnation or excess of damp vata or a kapha vata, patient may end up with fatty liver problems. This has become common in nowadays generation because the fat is not burning out. When I say burn, anything to burn, we need oxygen, correct? Oxygen helps in burning. Where do we get oxygen? Through the breathing, we get the oxygen. But what oxygen we are intaking is not sufficient to burn these fats because our intake is more compared to the intake of oxygen. The intake of fat foods or this intake of food material is more. Now, how do we get more oxygen? When you do a physical activity. When you do a physical activity, your lungs will get expanded. It will take more and more oxygen. As soon as you get the more and more oxygen, these oxygen will go to the blood, and this will help for metabolism. This is with respect to internal organs. We have seen many cases. I think you might have seen that if the fat increases, it will create a cholesterol, the rise in cholesterol level, triglyceride level will get rise, and patient may end up with fatty liver problems. And sometimes these fats will get and accumulate in the heart region, especially in the chest region. It creates the heart related problems also. The arteries inside that heart, it will get blocked. And sometimes, this is with respect to internal organs. And it's say externally, if you check the belly region, it is where the adipose tissue resides. It holds the fat, and the patient may end up with belly fat. And especially until shoulder region, this is a circular region here. Again, the fat cells are the building blocks of this region. And the buttocks region, chest region, fat is keep on increasing, keep on depositing, and finally increasing the cholesterol level in the blood. So the main reason is the lack of Agni. You can see in this graph that there is no Agni at all. The fire is not there. Excess of in is excess. Or you can say in Ayurveda, we can say Vata Kapha. But this can be minimized when you do a physical activity, especially for the patient who has excess of in excess. Physical activity is a must. It is a must. At least a walking for at least, for 1 kilometer or 2 kilometer daily helps them to reduce that, increase the metabolism. And you can ask this patient, they suffer from very weak digestion. The digestion is weak. If you have the morning breakfast, afternoon they will say, I don't want the food. The digestion is weak. They feel lazy. They always try to sleepy. They feel lethargy. They feel heaviness. They feel stomach bloating, belching sensation because of the weak digestion. So this is what are the basic diagnosis that we can do with liver chi stagnation or the excess of damp vata in the liver. And this diagnosis information we try to provide in the Nadifit also, so that it will make the diagnosis easier. And there are a lot of tuning. We are tunifying these data to provide even more accurate and even more specific. We are working on that to improve this diagnosis information and to speak exactly specific to the problem. And we are also tuning on the symptoms prediction. Earlier we were coming with few symptoms. Now we are updating it even for better accurate symptoms. Whether the patient opens his mouth or not, we don't bother about that. We want everything the Nadifit has to speak and tell. And we were tuning this data in a very accurate manner so that we try to understand this patient better. And we are also giving these tracks here. We are tuning this tracks performance also, because this tracks helps to understand the patient in a chronic stages. Suppose example, a patient has a liver chi stagnation over the period of 6 months or 1 year. What might be the chronic problem we will end up with that? it is very easy to predict the chronic cases when you have a multiple data or multiple readings of a single patient. We are working on this. We are working on this because we're getting a lot of data in everyday, day-to-day activities of Nadifit users. And in the diet part, yes, many customers they are asking even extended version of the diet part. Definitely, we are coming with that updated version of the diet so that we can give a diet chart to the patient so that they can follow it in their home or in their in their practice. And we are in the TCM point as we are giving the acupuncture things also to treat the points. And these points, yes, their tunifying is also required here, and we are working on that, tunifying the points so that exact the patient, make sure that the patient gets the result. That is very important because one thing is the diagnosis part. After doing all this diagnosis, patient should get the result also. So we were working on the tunification of the points so that the patient will get right treatment. So, and we are giving one more, already we mentioned this in the last webinar, like we are giving a regional language feature where you can generate the report in a regional language. So definitely we have a few more features that needs to be updated, okay, that we are going to disclose in the upcoming webinars. So we are planning to conduct a webinar in continuously now where we can disclose updated features of Nadifit and how these can be integrated in your clinical practice. Yeah, at the conclusion part, yeah, so today we have discussed about this liver patterns and liver chi stagnation. Any questions from your side, we are ready to take. So any questions, we are happy to take. Yes, sir. Any questions from your side, sir?
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sir.
Yeah, please, sir.
Good evening. Dr. Kishore, sir, from Hyderabad.
Yeah, how are you, sir?
Fine. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Attended this webinar. Yeah.
Sir, we are using this on a continuous basis.
Okay.
Just to inform you that yesterday, day before yesterday, I had a patient. Diagnosis was HLE nephritis. Okay.
Correct.
Autoimmune disease with inflammation in the kidney. Okay.
Yes. 100% correct.
I have not asked her to disclose any disease. We'll go with Nadifit first, then we'll talk about your disease.
Okay.
Luckily, I could able to capture it very properly. It showed pitta in kidney directly. No any organs were involved.
Okay.
That was very accurate.
Okay.
So I feel we need a rigorous practice, like ancient method of Nadipariksha.
Yes.
Rigorous practice to precise the diagnosis.
Yes, sir. And one more thing I want to mention here.
Dr. Mr. Manjunath, can I come?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, as the doctor from Hyderabad said, we need a rigorous practice. But like in my experience, what I felt is that if it is not precise, if I'm not capturing it properly, I cannot get the result. And also, at the end, you will see something like waves.
Correct.
And if you are perfect, it will be optimal. Otherwise, it will have a lot of other disturbance, and then you'll ask us to take the next one. That is one of the good thing what I see in Nadifit.
Okay. Yeah, sir. I want to say one more thing here. I can say that the initial level of algorithms or the initial level of this prediction algorithms what we did, I can say they are pretty accurate. Okay, but in the last 2 months actually we rigorously worked on it because we took feedback from many customers like you, like we personally called them, we asked them like what the problem they are facing and what the issue they are facing, and based on this we are fine-tuned in a best way, and that we are going to update in the coming next month, maybe in the one and a half month we are going to update that one thing. And the second thing is like, especially with the Nadifit users, I'm going to have a discussion with them particularly where I'm going to disclose the updated report for the Nadifit users, where I want to discussion with them, okay, to give a clarity. So we have made an updated report where even specific to the problem, even very specific. Okay, so that we will have one more discussion with the Nadifit users that we do it. Okay, once it is done, we will release that maybe in the next month. We will release that. The updated algorithms for predicting the basic VPK and the organ level of VPK.